to be like a movement of solidarity
Yeah.
within the community. And
Yeah,
and I
just that, but also they still do other things in the community besides like violent things.
well yeah, they don't only do violent things is what I'm kind of intending to say. Like but and like the whole like replacing the B's with C's thing and whatnot. Like I personally feel like that ultimately like for him and to a lot of people, like that's no different honestly than like I don't know, me posting a German flag and saying that I'm proud of being of German heritage. You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
it's quote unquote repping your background,
Okay.
like, which is perfectly understandable. But unfortunately, I feel like I'm seeing my students getting way too involved in the symbolism of like, oh, so and so is Crip and so is Spoke and so is this, that, and the other. And some of them are kind of like, for lack of a better term, wannabe gangsters and look at like, and look up to like, not saying that he's the only reason, but they look up to like celebrities. And it's not only Snoop, it's like multiple celebrities. Like, it was Pop Smoke when he was alive too. Like, it was just any multitude of celebrities, like the Chicago rappers repping Gangster Disciples. Like,
Well, there's a big difference between Snoop and those guys. A lot of folks who you are talking about rep a lot of negativity. Snoop doesn't. A lot of those folks are are not only affiliated but involved. They're like either active or they're actively promoting, bullshit and violence. Snoop doesn't.
so like, well, no, I don't think he actively promotes, like,
Yeah, but I'm saying those other people that you're talking about
no, I
do.
don't think Snoop active. I agree with you on both counts. Like, I don't think that, like I agree with you on both counts there. What the fudge is this thing doing? But like but I feel like that like while Snoop does I think at least make the effort to like he doesn't like the other guys do like the bees with C's thing and they promote violence and you're right that Snoop doesn't necessarily do that.
Hmm.
But I feel like in like young impressionable minds, like not to sound cliche about that, but I just feel like, young impressionable minds don't necessarily see it that way. So it's like, and I not that I think it's his responsibility to counteract that
Hmm.
alone, but it's just a situation of how do we counteract that because like I see things like my students thinking that, for lack of a better term, thinking it's cool to be affiliated and then acting like, you know, that and then like getting into things that they shouldn't, which is again their own decision and you can't completely blame that on the media. But like how do you counteract the fact that like kids see like and now I'm not even necessarily talking about Snoop alone because I acknowledge what you're saying about that like he's not promoting violence and I agree with that. but just like rappers in general who promote the negative side of affiliation on social media. Like, how do we counteract that? Because like it's getting kids into a situation where like they're kind of like, and I see this with my students a lot, like where they're kind of like wannabe gangsters. Like they don't really want to be like hardcore affiliated, but they want to be cool. And then they end up in very precarious situations. So I guess I'm thinking like, well, what do we do for that?
Oh, I don't know. You gotta.
Well, I think. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you can go.
I think you're talking about two different issues, right? It's kind of like when Bill O'Reilly used to conflate rap music with people responding to music and carrying out what they hear in songs or video games, right? We used to handily dismiss that. And again, I would say that this is the same situation, and those like there you can't counteract that. It should, and I don't mean it in a negative way, it should be dismissed as much as you would dismiss the notion that rap music are making kids go out and kill people. What needs to be counteracted, because Snoop Dogg isn't going to drive people to be affiliated. The conditions in communities are going to drive people to be affiliated. You know, certain systemic things, certain situations, certain conditions, those are the things that need to be counteracted. How someone, because Snoop is just one example of a bunch of different types of people, and I'm not even talking about affiliated people who may have been affiliated with something negative that we see on social media. You understand what I'm saying? And I mean, you see drug
Well, yeah,
culture,
there's
you
other
know,
things. There's a lot of other things too. Like
right.
there's drug culture, and there's like, you know, some of these same rappers are promoting like,
Well, I'm
uh,
not even talking rappers, right? Like Charlie
well,
Sheen or what have you,
or
and winning,
Charlie
which was like a
Sheen, yeah.
popular phrase. You know, winning was like a thing. And I don't know that he did or he didn't inspire a whole bunch of people to, you know, he went on this whole, you know, he used this platform to say, like, listen, I can function on drugs, and then proved as much.
I mean, I
You know
think
what I
that's
mean?
loose. I think that's, I don't think he functioned, but that's just, but I know
Well, he
what you
did though.
mean.
He
I know
did.
what you mean. I know what you mean. I'm
And then
kind of
said I could
joking.
quit, and yeah, you know what I mean. And I'm not advocating for that, but I don't think it inspired a whole bunch of people to say, oh, you know, Charlie Sheen can do it, I can do it.
Oh, so I'm gonna go shoot up heroin.
Right. You know what I mean? However, I think that whatever put Charlie Sheen in that position and will put a whole bunch of other, let's say, affluent children or otherwise children of, you know, from other ilks or walks of life, excuse me, in that position needs to be addressed.
No, I agree. Like, I I kind of agree. Yeah, I do see what you're saying, but then it becomes a conversation of like, and honest to God, like I said last night, I honestly believe that I actually said it today to I actually said it today to my coworkers, and they agree with me, but there's not that much that can be done about it right now. But that I want my kids back in school, hypothetically, because like because they're safer with us than they are out on the streets, and that's honestly where a lot of them have been. Like, instead of like in class on Zoom, and they, you know, if they're in school, they're forced to do their work, and it's a, well, I don't want to say forced to do their work, but when they're in school, they're in a positive environment, and like when they're out of school, they're subject to peer pressure from like from their friends, like to just ditch and go do whatever, which presents more opportunities for them to get in trouble. And like the bottom line of it is, I think, like, more than anything else, I blame COVID for multiple reasons for my kids getting into things that they shouldn't. You know what I mean?
No, I get it. I would say that what a lot of people on the outside looking in, so to speak, even though I think you're more on the inside than you're on the outside because you have an ear to the street, is gang culture is a culture. Like
Well,
it's a
that's what I
culture.
said before
So,
you came on. I said that, like, for example, um, like Snoop Dogg replacing his B's with C's is kind of similar to like when I post the German flag during Oktoberfest and say that I'm a
hmm
proud and happy German. You know what I mean?
right. Like gang culture is a culture. Street culture is a culture. So if you're looking at attacking these problems at the root, right, on a community level, you're not going to exclude gangs when you sit down at the table. So, like when we attach words like positive or negative, we're really talking about a perspective, and it's that perspective is subject to the individual. You understand what I'm saying? Whether
I
it's
mean,
whether
yeah,
it's
like I don't think anybody would agree that like just randomly shooting at people is like a positive thing, though. Like I don't
right.
think anybody would agree that murder is a positive thing.
Yeah, but you're going to the most extreme examples of street or gang culture.
Well, yeah, that is the most extreme.
Right. That you know
That
what I
that
mean?
is the most extreme example, but I
But
mean,
but what I'm ultimately saying is that if you're and I'm just gonna be real quick. If you're really looking at the root, like if a community was to come together to try to fix this problem, they're not gonna do it by excluding gangs
no, I agree with you, like 100%. Like you know,
or excluding street culture. Excuse me.
last year, my school actually had like these really like they were great, like guest speakers who had been involved in street culture and had unfortunately faced some consequences for it and did some time in jail. And when they got out, like they dedicated themselves to like talking to the kids about how like, you know, we in hindsight we don't really think that it was worth it. Like there's better things out there, and I think it's important that we included like that they've been included in these kinds of discussions, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but I mean like the actual members, flag waving members of gangs can't be excluded from the table.
Well, yeah, no, you're right. Like, and obviously, like, you know, some of my kids are, and and we don't shun them or whatever, but they're also not the leaders that we need to be talking to either. Like, you know what I mean?
hmm No, I get it. I get what you're saying.
Like,
Yeah, it's hard to look at it in a. I mean, we can, the overarching narrative is that gang or street culture certainly is negative, but there's micro narratives that apply to individuals and how they're impacted by being a part of or participating, and in many cases, it's not always negative.
well, no, and I think that I don't think it is always negative either. Like, we're
I mean,
talking,
we don't necessarily like it because I don't. You know what I mean?
but
I'm
we're
sorry. Go
talking
ahead.
people who join, we're talking a lot of people who, like, join up with a, like, and become a flag waving member of a gang, ostensibly, like, out of
Or street culture.
solidarity or street culture.
Some kid who just decides I'm gonna
Out of
take
solidarity,
my
they want a
newspaper money
family.
and open up a bud house and just be successful at it for 10 years and pay all my bills or what have you. Like I don't imagine he thinks his life is horrible.
No, I don't think so either. And I'm honest to God, I'm not opposed to that either. But but my concern, like, I'm not opposed to like quote unquote the drug trafficking activities or whatever. Honest to God, I'm not even opposed to like people moving heroin because like it's not something I want to do, but like it's ultimately like it's ultimately, it's not like that, like there's like that they're shooting at people. Like it's it's not good for society to have people on heroin, but it's not like they're shooting at people and potentially hitting innocent bystanders. Like my big concern, and I think it goes outside of gang culture and street culture, is like my bigger concern is violence. Like I don't think people should be in jail for nonviolent offenses either at all. But my big concern is like that violence has many more unintended ripple effects, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I 100% agree.
Like a lot of like, you know, crime in New York right now, for example, like that. From what I can gather, like, and I don't hear as much about it because I don't really hear side conversation from my students the way I used to when they were in person. But what I did hear was that there was a lot of like what sounds like someone's brushing their teeth. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I'm but I heard a lot of like, that a lot of like shootings that were going on in the neighborhood around the school ostensibly were retaliation related, and like it was just like the vicious cycle of like one group goes after another group, then the other group feels like they got to retaliate, then the first group feels like they got to retaliate, etc., etc.
Whoever
And
was
then
brushing their teeth has to show us their pearly whites.
and then in the process of all of that like cycle of retaliation, innocent bystanders get hit. And that's kind of what I don't like about quote unquote street culture. But I think that that's more than just street culture. That's gun culture.
Well, that's why people like, Tupac tried to come out with like rules for the street to like minimize innocent bystander violence and things like that. And he wanted to go to the heads of all the gangs and like try to come up with like rules, rules
Like,
for the
don't
street.
shoot into a crowd of school children, even if one of them is your target.
Yeah, yeah, yep, stuff like that.
Because what I found out the other day, like my student that got hit by a stray bullet at dismissal, like the person that they were aiming for wasn't even the person I originally thought they were aiming for. Like the person that they were after was absent that day and wasn't even there.
Hmm.
But because they didn't see that person, they were just like aiming at like anybody who happened to be wearing red.
Hmm.
And that led to like another student, an innocent bystander, being hit.
Yeah.
And the poor girl, like she's still got a bullet in her shoulder, like it's in a place where they can't remove it, or it's like doing the surgery to remove it is life threatening in itself because it's too close to a major artery.
Right.
My
So
goodness.
it's like, y'all are gonna have like vigilante justice, and I don't blame them for wanting to have vigilante justice, because let's be serious, like let's get serious here, people. Like the cops aren't gonna come, and it's already well entrenched not to call the cops, and I don't freaking blame them. But you also got to minimize innocent bystanders getting hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I think that's gun culture more than like anything else, or like the culture of feeling like that you have to like go so far as to shoot somebody who's wronged you. And
Right.
everybody does that. White people do that too. Why do you think we do? why do you think we've had so many problems?
Right.
Like people just are trigger happy when they feel threatened.
Right.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Anyways, that's I think
You
I've
should
like
Oh, thank you.
mute. You should mute him. Oh, he's back.
sorry, Sam. I'm
No,
sorry.
that's good. No, you muted me. That's good. I was talking to somebody else. Good.
Oh, were you talking to Mama Carol? I think he's at his mom's. I think he's talking to his mom.
Oh, okay.
I am. So I'm gonna just give me 1 sec.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So I'll get back on the call in a bit.
Okay.
Anyways, like, I mean, that's kind of what I had to say about that. And you're right that, like, honestly, I will admit that I have kind of like the visceral reaction to it, because to like seeing things on social media and whatnot, because I've had the experience, like, almost like of seeing it from the quote unquote inside, of seeing how like young people are responding to it, and like having to do the work of like breaking that vicious cycle, you know what I mean?
No, I see what you're saying.
I was gonna say, anybody home? I'm gonna feel like
Yes.
I'm at a seance or something.
I just know
Katie.
that people with these platforms aren't
They're not the
oblivious to the impact that they have and what's going on in the neighborhoods that they, obviously came up in.
Hey,
well,
what's
and
good, Katie?
they're also not the sole driver of these problems, obviously.
Right.
Like stuff like property crimes going up lately, I blame COVID. People are
Well,
broke.
when you look at someone like Snoop Dogg, I would venture to say, in action, Snoop Dogg is more concerned than probably all of us on this Zoom with what goes on in that type of culture. Hello, did I lose y'all?
I mean, no, you didn't lose me. Like,
Okay, it just got I heard like real dead space. And what I mean is, he grew up in that life. He knows what it's like. He knows what the young kid on the block is facing. He knows what the people who are going to listen to him on his platform are dealing with. Like, he intimately is aware of and understands it from a perspective that we probably, and I've came up a certain way, Mike, Katie, we all came up a certain way, but like Snoop was really in it. You know what I mean? So I would venture a guess, at the very least, that he is more cognizant than all of us on the type of impact he can have, and even how to approach being a positive impact.
I mean, I see what you're saying. Like, and I think that, like, honestly, that's something that, like, honestly, that's like a bother to me in a sense. Like, not like his ability to see what's going on, obviously, but I feel like sometimes that how do I phrase this? That like I'm at a disadvantage, like in doing the work that I do because I come from a different background. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it's not like that I never had like adversity or never saw like what things were like, you know. I do better with it, I venture to say, than a lot of like coworkers that I've worked with previously. Just simply because I've actually like worked retail jobs and lived in certain neighborhoods and whatnot, and had to deal with like building disrepair. Like I haven't lived I mean, as a kid maybe I did, but I haven't lived my whole life like in a nice country house in the suburbs and had things handed to me either. But at the same time, like that doesn't negate like the elephant in the room, I guess, of my white privilege. And it is something that I think about, or that I'm self-aware about, of like, you know, no matter how much I'm genuine and I care about my kids and everything else, like and want to do what's best by them, I'm an intruder, you know what I mean? When it comes down to it.
I'm just going to say really quickly that I do not support the moving of heroin as a means of making money. I'll just had to get that off my chest.
Well,
Then, all right.
I don't either. Ultimately I don't, but I'm just saying, like, on a continuum, to me, that's not as
Felt good to
objectionable
know.
as
Now,
gun-
folks,
as gun violence.
if at some point New York does legalize, will you still stand by these statements?
Who, me?
Yes, you and Emily.
If they're able to recapitulate it in a form that it's not lethal, and that you can get them in, and I mean, I know that's like, I know that's kind of like, you know, kind of capitulating to the pharmaceutical industry, but I mean, the way that people it's not meant to be it's not meant to be used as self-medication, because
Okay.
people obviously, it has incredibly deleterious effects on the people who do, so
Okay.
if they
Well,
legalize
the
it.
pharmaceutical it is legal though already, hypothetically.
Yeah, I know, but the way people use, I mean, it's destructive. I know that like there's the whole like, you know, they control like which drugs are legal and which drugs aren't. But just because they're using it in a way to like make profits for themselves doesn't mean that some of the ones that are illegal for reasons that are not good. Some of them are illegal for reasons that are very good because they can kill you.
Well,
Right.
no, I agree with that about
Right.
I agree with that about heroin. You're not going to get any argument from me there. What
Right.
I'm saying is that it's actually like that some of the pharmaceuticals, and this just came up in the news this week actually, like Purdue Pharma is actually being shut down and federally charged for promoting OxyContin.
Yeah.
Because to me, I believe that like heroin is illegal for a reason, then OxyContin should be illegal for that same reason, because pain pills are what drive the opioid epidemic in my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. But when I had my accident 5 years ago, you know, my mom was like really, like, she's just like, she didn't even want me to take the pain pills. She was just like, she's like, take less than what they prescribe you. And I was thinking to myself, like, it was really, really painful. Like, it was painful for me to just like be awake. So I told her, I was just like, I'm going to, whatever dosage they gave me, obviously it's for pain management. And I'm going to take that because it's really, really painful, but I'm not going to get it refilled or exceed that. And I didn't. So I know there's a lot of danger around getting hooked on it. I don't remember if it was OxyContin or Percocet. It was one of the two, but
Probably Lortab.
Yeah.
Lortab's their go-to pain
Thank you, Mr. Pharmacist.
prescription. I mean, Lortab is I'm not speaking for Sam. I just know Lortab is like the go-to.
Okay.
And that's an opioid for sure.
Right. I don't know. It could have been.
Lortab's definitely stronger than Percocet.
I mean, for me,
It's
for a while, like I would always, and given this was like 10 years ago, but they would always give me Vicodin. Like that was the go-to for a while.
Yeah,
Like,
10 years ago.
Yeah,
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 it's
I was about to say.
changed throughout the years. I remember
Yeah,
Vicodin being the thing in Eminem songs early
well,
on.
I'm talking like 2000, like 2003, 2004. So
Yeah,
I think that was the go-to at that time. And I'm not gonna lie, like I did the same thing as you did, Sam. Like when I had my wisdom teeth, when I had my impacted wisdom teeth removed, because like that's friggin' surgery and it hurts like a bitch. Like I took the prescription as prescribed as well. Um, but like I took the prescription as prescribed as well, and like then just let it go after it was gone. It was gone. But like later on, I think the next time I had like 4 or 5 years later, I got this. I was in the same situation where I had a root canal, and it hurt like hell, and they gave me Vicodin, but that time the Vicodin didn't do a darn thing. Like, in fact, it made the problem worse. Like, it didn't do a darn thing for the pain, and it made me feel like I was gonna pass out.
Hmm.
So, like, that was the end of. So that was the end of that for me. Like, I'm just not one of those people who can get into that kind of thing anyway, because I don't like how it makes me
Yeah.
feel. But at the same time, look, you're right. There's a reason why heroin is illegal, because it causes problems. It's not like I don't like. I know tons of people that well, not tons, but I know people that it's caused problems for. You know what I mean?
I just wanted to make sure. I didn't think that you were actually saying that you were okay with people moving heroin. I just wanted to like get
No,
that
I'm
out
not.
of me. Yeah,
No,
I
no,
was
I'm not okay with it. I just like I I
like
think
you were comparing it to violent crime.
yeah. Well, and I
And I
think
remember that, but but yeah, but heroin, but that's also, yeah, in a way, it's not a violent crime in the traditional sense, but I do think that it can be interpreted as one.
well, hypothetically, yes. Like I
and certainly heroin affects a different type of hood than, say, the hood that Snoop Dogg is speaking to.
Yeah, I think that I personally just, and I don't mean to like interrupt anybody or go back to a subject that you guys had already moved past, but I think for me, it's just, I think it could be interpreted as someone profiting off of other people's like disorders and
addictions
diseases and taking advantage of them and making of it by making a profit. So I do think
you
that
mean
no,
like
I
the pharmaceutical industry?
or
that's
pharmaceutical industry or street dealers of heroin.
yes, yeah.
And look, I agree with you 100% about that. You're not going to get any argument from me there that it's that people pushing weight with heroin and the pharmaceutical companies pushing
Oh
pills
yeah, the
is
ads
like
on the ads
it's
on
a
TV for
detriment to
all sorts of
society. But
yeah,
I
yep.
guess my point is that it's not as I guess immediate of a detriment to society
Yeah.
as a shooting. Like it's more of like a long-term detriment to the addict and the people and around them and the consequences that follow over a long term.
Well,
But like
Well,
a
it's
shooting, like
also
the wrong person gets hit, they're dead. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That's my issue.
You know, it's also dangerous when they ascribe violence to drugs because they can tack on a lot more years. You know, like when
Agreed.
someone gets caught with acid, they charge like however many years per little square of acid or whatever, and someone gets sent up the river for having like a sheet that they were gonna, you know, make some money with at a party, and it's like ends up being very uh, they just blown out of proportion.
Well, and that's where you kind of get into the territory too of like conspiracy and RICO, because that because that's where people justify like that somebody like moving weight and drugs is also complicit in violent crime, because like the organization that they're moving drugs for has committed violent acts in the name of that organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I, honest to God, like I have a, and I go through and I go over this and I talk to my students about this all the time, like just as like precaution. Like I have a bone to pick about the way that, like, about the way that the judicial system uses RICO charges,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of people out there who, like, you know, they grew up and like look at some of my kids, for example, they wouldn't hurt a fly, but they grew up in a neighborhood where, like, you know, there's kids who are starting to get deep into like the violent side of street culture now and are committing some violent crimes. But these are like the kids they went to, that like they all went, you know, they all grew up on the block together, they all went to elementary school together, like they've known each other since Jump Street. And the ones who wouldn't hurt a fly are getting like RICO charges, and conspiracy allows prosecutors to lump them in
Mm-hmm.
with the people who are actually committing the violence, thinking that they're doing a service by like using a blunt force instrument to get rid of all of them, ostensibly.
Yeah.
So that's like a bone I have, that like laws that were enacted to bring down the mafia are now basically being used, like RICO laws, I think, are like a big
Well, the charge is
cause of
racketeering,
mass
right?
incarceration. Yeah, racketeering. Thank you.
And it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to discern what is and what isn't racketeering when you seem to have a loose organization. You know, I've been around organizations that weren't organizations. Like I have a friend, rest in peace, you know, who died very young, and he would not harm a fly. However, he had the best plug, so he was the man. So everybody around him would. He was the dude. He had everything everybody needed. So consequently, he had all of these soldiers, because that's what they were, because he was the bag. But he himself wouldn't harm. He was just so laid back and so cool. He ended up getting shot. The bullet wasn't meant for him. They were shooting at someone else at a party, and he got shot and killed.
Now,
But
when you say this person wouldn't harm a fly,
he wouldn't physically harm a fly.
but he would like employ other folks to do that for him, or
No, he was the bag. He was the plug.
okay.
He was involved
So-
in like the drug side of the business, but he wasn't. But
If
not
he'd have got
the-
charged, the charges against him would have been racketeering.
Right.
He would have been
because
considered
other
the
people
boss.
around, because he would be considered the boss of
Right,
the
but-
people who were committing violent acts, even if he wasn't ordering them to do those violent
Absolutely.
acts specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Okay. So these people were just doing this on their own volition.
So they all hung out at his house.
Just out
This
of
is the
the
projects. Out of loyalty. Out of like, we not gonna let nothing happen to the bag.
Right.
And it wasn't like he was like, if somebody does something to me, y'all don't do nothing.
Right.
He also knew that no one could do anything to him, because I got all these dudes
Sure.
who be on my porch. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
That's gonna handle
And
that.
they're-
They'll do
they're-
it even if I don't tell them to do it.
And they're okay. And so they're like not just the street soldiers, but they're like moving the product, right? Or-
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Everybody is
That's-
eating off of him.
I see.
We
I get it.
eat because, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so that's really kind of what it is. Like, no, he never said, let's organize. This is what we call, y'all all work for me.
Right.
But I don't have to say that. Y'all work for
Right.
me. You
Right.
understand what I'm saying? Like I
Sure.
don't ever really have to
Like the
say
way
it. So
the
like,
chips fell was that the way the chips fell was that it was kind of organized ultimately like legitimate business, but that
right.
was not like, but the intent was not like him sitting around just ordering hits on people because that's
Right.
not what
And
he was
he didn't sit
doing.
down and plan out a business plan, but it still worked that way. It's still, you know, so you don't have to actually be organized to be organized in the sense that there were certain people that got things at certain times.
Now, did
Certain
these
people
folks end
were
up getting in?
absolutely
Did these folks end up getting in trouble?
no, because he got killed. And when he got
Oh,
killed, everything crumbled. He had the plug. He was the
okay.
plug because he had the plug.
Okay. I
So
was
he
just
was the
wondering
bag.
because I was just wondering, depending on how much money they were getting, how good of a lawyer they had. If the lawyer could say, "Hey, like you can't prove any organization here," but it
Oh
didn't get to
well, yeah,
that point.
it never got to that point. He
Yeah.
got killed. It wasn't even intended for him. And when he got killed, it crumbled because he was the bag.
What was it
It was
intended for? One of his soldiers, or
no. It was they were all just at a party at a club,
He was
and
in
a
the wrong
shooting
place
took
at the wrong
place,
time.
and
yeah?
everybody ran, and he got shot in the head. It was
Okay.
errant. Someone started shooting in the crowd. He got hit in the head, and he died on the spot.
Okay.
So ostensibly he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. It didn't have
Yeah,
anything to do with those
nothing to
activities.
do with him. Nothing to
This
do with
was
none
in
of.
this was in Buffalo.
Yeah, in the 90s.
Oh, okay. What is it? Was it a club or
Yeah, it was at a club.
okay?
What's a
Yeah.
club? We don't have clubs anymore. Not with
And
Is it
so,
a
you
place?
know,
Is it a place that's still around, or is it one of those
no,
places that got? Yeah.
yeah, it was old spot in the 90s. I wasn't even in the country at the time when it happened. They called me and told me.
I
Oh, this
remember.
is when you were in Germany.
Yeah.
I remember living across the street from a place. Maybe you guys might remember the name of it, but I think it was when me, O, and D all lived on Main Street across from Wendy's. There was a place like diagonal from us. It was like a little, like a little bar, like club lounge kind of place that was always a little bit popping, but they seemed to have like, they
The
seemed to
Lions
like,
Den?
what's that?
The Lions Den?
No, the Lions Den was cool. This place seemed to erupt.
Sensations.
This place seemed to erupt in gunfire at least like once a week or something.
I know Sensations and Touch of Class used to have a lot of gunfire.
It was like right around
No,
where
this
we
is
lived,
so
across from like Wendy's.
but it was in the back. You had to drive into the back to get to it.
That sound. What was it called?
I thought it was called the Lions Den.
No, the Lions Den was cool. No, we performed at the Lions Den. That place was cool. No, the
I
place
think
we're
we've
talking about.
established we're not referring to the Lions Den.
Yeah, the place we're talking about, we wouldn't have gone to.
I know we used to have the IPE, we used to have Sensations, we had Touch of Class, obviously
I
Skateland.
went to IP.
It was
I went
next
to IP.
to IP.
Well, yeah. All I
It
know
was
is that
down the
place
street
was
from
close.
IP.
Yeah, all I know is that place was close to where we lived.
I mean, so we'll just say the club that shall for the time remain nameless.
Yeah, but I always
yeah.
wondered how they stayed open after like having so much trouble.
See, that's the thing. The difficult thing with racketeering and dealing with racketeering, at least in the hood, is that, when Emily, when you were talking about, gang culture, there are very few active gangs, right? Like, so when you think of gangs, you think of things like the Crips and the Bloods and the Vice Lords and like these gangs.
And the Latin Kings and
Yeah, but the reality is, in most areas, they're just crews of people that know each other, and they're a gang by association. I live on this block. I live on this street. I live on this block, or I'm from this. We're not really just a gang with a name. We're just a crew because we live on this street. And as we get to a certain age or we start getting involved in certain things, we do business together, or our business overlaps each other. So then, like, it's hard to really define racketeering or say when it applies to these situations, right? Or say it is or it isn't. It actually, you know, Flav hit it on the head. You know, it really comes down to the story. Like I always say, a case is litigated best by the lawyer that just tells the best story. That's kind of what it comes down to. The lawyer that can just tell the best story wins the case.
That's
But I
very
mean,
true.
like these, like in my opinion, I feel like as you mentioned, like like these loosely defined street crews, like where it's like, you know, everybody grew up on the same block and like ostensibly informally go into business with each other. I feel like that, like,
Or business next to each other.
or next to each other or around each other, or
Right.
there's somehow a Venn diagram going, kind of type of thing going
Hmm.
on there. Like,
Hmm.
that's like them growing up together and doing everything together is no different than like me and like the 4 or 5 kids around my age that grew up in my neighborhood that we used to play together and did everything together. Like, the only difference is that like we weren't going into that kind of business because we didn't have, I guess, the economic need.
But here's a scenario, Emily. You and your 4 friends, you know, 3 girls, 2 guys, however you want to associate it, right? Who grew up together playing hide and go seek in the suburbs. Y'all get to high school,
It's more like me
and
and it's more like me and 4 guys, but anyway, go on.
okay, but y'all get to high school, and one of you decides, man, I got a continual hookup for prescriptions for Lortabs that I can sell, and you're like, oh, I got a hookup for for ecstasy, and you know maybe one of you is just really smart in math. So while
That's
y'all don't
me.
have an organization, they just decide to like track the numbers, right? And the documentary will say the the Richport 5, and it'll start off, these 5 children had perfect grades. They had the wonderful, like all of that, right? But y'all will be associated as a crew that proliferated a lot of drugs and made a lot of money.
No, that's, yeah, you're like, you got a point about that. Like, when, like, you know, that if we had just decided like to, I can't even say start a business because it's not formally starting a business.
Right. You guys just realize we can do this. And we're not even a business. We just got these connects, and all we do is go to parties and sell out. You see
No,
what I'm saying?
no, that makes like 100% sense. Like, it's like, that's like the, I mean, that's like, you know, when I was away in college and living in the dorms, like like there were like 3 or 4 dudes that were friends with each other that you went to get weed. Like, if somebody really wanted to take it there, that would be racketeering, even though they weren't even making a freaking that much of a profit, you know?
I mean, yeah, it would be, right. The racketeering is such a loosely defined legal term because it speaks to any of a number of criminal activities under the guise of an organization.
Even if the organization was never formally created, ostensibly.
Right. Because
It was created to fight organized crime.
right. And here's the thing. A point of strategy for criminals is to pretend not to be an organization.
Right.
Is to pretend to be doing everything on their own volition.
Right. We don't have a name. We don't have you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's also, but that doesn't mean that they all operate that way. That's a point of strategy that can't be ignored when someone is litigating, which is why it goes down to telling the best story. Like, I can't ignore that. Well, maybe these guys just got hip to things and they don't call themselves the Crips. It just happens to be 20 of them. They all happen to hang together. They all happen to get their product from, you know, the same sources, and they all happen to, you know, ride for each other.
And I mean, even if they did try to do that, you know, I mean, the Crips is such a big umbrella term, you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
that a good
I'm
lawyer
sorry.
would tear that apart, like, you know.
I shouldn't
Well,
be
that's why
laughing.
when they bring charges on Crips, they do sets, little groups and sets. And
Yeah,
Like
they
because
do
you're right.
like
The
the blah blah
26
blah.
nutty block.
The
Yeah.
26 nutty block. Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing, but like, I'm just getting this vision in my mind of. Did anyone here ever see that episode of South Park where Timmy and Jimmy accidentally joined the Crips?
No,
And
I
then
don't think so.
it was like I mean, it wasn't that early, but it was like maybe like fifth or sixth season South Park, so it wasn't like one of the first ones, but it was early on. And it was early on in the series where Timmy and Jimmy they basically get upset that everyone is like paying attention to the story of Christopher Reeve getting paralyzed in an accident,
Mhm.
and so they felt like that they were at metaphorical war with like the people who were disabled from birth versus the people who got disabled in an accident. Long story short, they decide that they're going to make their own club for people who are disabled from birth, and they make a t-shirt. They go to the t-shirt place, and they said with this t-shirt that says they decide they're going to call themselves the Crips because they're out thinking it's short for, you know, crippled
Cripple.
people.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
and the t-shirt guy says, well, there's already a club, and it turns into a total like a hilarious like scenario because like that only Matt and Trey could do, because they interpret that as, oh well, there's another club of people just like us that meet in this old warehouse in Denver. Why don't we go down and check it out?
Got it.
I don't want to segue. I don't want to segue at all, but I have to.
No, I was just BSing. Go on.
I'm gonna completely segue because I'm getting ready to bounce and I'll be back at 10. But I wanted to say, my man Sam, it's been a minute. It's so good to hear your voice and holler at you, and I'm kind of mad I didn't get to really kick it with you since, you know, this particular show because I'm about to leave. But man,
All right.
Sam, it's good to hear you, bro.
Good to hear you.
Been-
It's good to hear your voice too, Ish. Really is.
It's been a minute, man.
It
All right,
has
we'll kick
been a minute.
I
It's
can't
good
say
to,
it's good to see you, but I could say it's good to hear
yeah,
you.
it is good to hear your. It's really good to hear your voice, Ish. Really good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Likewise, man. That's serious, man. I'm
Awesome.
you guys are gonna go on.
No, I was gonna say yes, excellent, and I hope to hear you. I hope to hear you again at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, you guys
hope-
gonna still be on at 10?
We'll be back on that ish at 10.
Okay, I'm gonna get to
All
booty
right.
talk.
Okay.
Fantastic.
I'm
Have
just kidding.
fun.
I'll be back at 10. Emily, you already know EMZ.
Yeah,
I
I hope
already know.
I hope your remote works well. That 4 to 6 hours is a lot to get through. I don't know if you're fast forwarding to the good parts or
Listen, I only watch the girls that I like.
okay.
Oh my God, I cannot. I can't. Seriously, I just. That is
I'm just saying.
that is how dudes watch porn anyway. So I'm not even. I
Right?
can't even go any faster than that.
You gotta
Although
watch
come
it.
on,
We're not
You got
we're
you
not
keep
a
your hand on the
monolith.
fast forward
Sam,
button.
we're
That's
not
what
we're
it
not
is.
we're not a monolith, Sam.
That's true.
Like,
No,
what's
it's
up with all
no,
this
you're, no,
foreplay?
we're not a monolith. I'm just
No,
making
Sam
fun
is
of
right.
I'm
Sam
making
is
fun
right.
of a stereotype. I'm making fun of the stereotype.
It's a good stereotype to make fun of because you're right. Like we keep our hand on the fast forward button.
Yep.
Ain't nobody trying to watch none of that foreplay. Like, let's get down to
You
business.
keep one hand on the fast forward button, and we all know where the other one is.
Yep.
Like when she makes that facial expression, that's what I'm gonna.
Oh my God.
That's what I'm gonna hit play.
Yeah. Yep.
No, okay, I'm kidding though. By the way, I'm
That's
not
okay.
watching.
We
That's,
know you're kidding.
We know you're kidding. There's like, oh, I have a lot to say about this. But anyway, go. I do.
Yeah, from
I
the
do know-
moment you said DVDs, I hoped you were kidding.
I know that was the part that killed me.
And
That was-
actually,
that
the
was
4 to 6 hours, the 4 to 6 hours. Also.
4 to 6 hours. Yo, you remember them DVDs from back? I know you remember them, Katie. They was like 10 hours plus, like straight up. You remember in the early 2000s when everyone was bootlegging DVDs?
Definitely.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
I
And they-
remember that.
You used to buy the porn DVDs. It would be like 10 hours plus. It would be like Booty
I
Talk
used to study.
26 with additional bonus footage. Like, who wants to see the behind the scenes? You know what? We'll have this conversation. That's like, I'll be back. I'll be back.
You're walking yourself into a hole.
Now be back on your ish.
Yes.
All right, that was a little in front of the scenes
That was hilarious.
talk with Ish Mavens and the outtakes of Booty Talk 26.
Yeah, seriously.
I thought it was 28.
28.
Ah, there you go. Y'all were paying attention.
I listen in class.
Yeah.
I saw it already.
You saw it already?
Yeah.
Is it better than 26?
Nah, 26.
Nah.
26 was classic, right?
Yeah, it was a classic.
Personally, I prefer 37.
Oh, that's like that's the Millennium version.
Mm-hmm. No, that's the Kevin Smith version. 37.
That's the
Uh,
that's the pancake version.
You know what? I'm so mad. Like, after
I'm sorry,
After
I'm going to take
Misha's
the
birth-
dog out.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll start. I guess we'll start when you get back. We got the Beetlejuice in your in the can.
oh, excellent. Do I have to provide a link, or I didn't?
No,
find the
it's
script.
already been provided in the chat.
Oh,
The link is there. Everyone should have it.
oh, fantastic.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right.
So yeah, we should figure out what I feel like KD's voice would be good for a for the what do you call the person the narrator?
All right.
I mean, we'll obviously probably have to do multiple parts anyway.
Yeah, I think we definitely will.
Yeah, but do folks have feelings on what parts they like?
I'm playing the audience.
The audience. I don't know if there's room for.
I mean,
audience on this.
there are multi. I mean, I could do. There are like there are a bunch of parts that I'm comfortable with. So
Okay.
it would be difficult to, as long as I'm not playing people. I mean, I think the
As long as you're not playing two
Right,
characters
people who are
opposite
like-
each other.
yeah, who are like talking to each other. Yeah, because that wouldn't be
Right.
fair. I don't want to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But
Gotcha.
yes, exactly. But as long as yeah, I mean, I don't have to say.
Yeah,
anything
you don't
else.
want. Yeah, you don't want to play Barbara and Adam.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
So,